Hi everyone, we're really looking forward to speaking to Anna today. So Anna is kindly going to give us her perspective of what it's like living with a brain tumour diagnosis from a carer's perspective or a loved one. So Anna is the new wife of Alex, who has spoken to us before about living with a glioblastoma, and Anna's just going to tell us a bit about what the whole journey's been like for her from a loved one's perspective. So Anna, do you want to just tell us a bit about how this all came about and what it was like, the diagnosis and things from your side?
Yes, of course. So I'll try and keep this as brief as possible. So this happened, coming up to 2 years ago now. Alex and I were living in Australia at the time. It was in the thick of COVID, so we were working from home. Everyone was in and out of lockdown, and I remember Alex, I think we'd been out the night before, and I was having a nap upstairs and Alex was having a nap on the sofa, and as you do, and he woke up and was like, oh gosh, what's that smell, Anna? There's something on fire. There's a candle burning. I was like, whoa, like what are you talking about? Thinking, well, that's a bit weird, but he's hungover. Just put it down to that. And then that kept happening over the course of maybe a couple of weeks, where he'd smell what he perceived to be burning rubber and feel a little bit dizzy for maybe 30 seconds or so, and then be back to normal. But obviously, the longer this was happening, we were like, oh, this doesn't sound quite right. And I, being the helpful Dr. Google that I am, had Googled what maybe it could be. And actually, it didn't lead me to brain cancer. It came up with an aneurysm. So I was, encouraging him, I guess, to go and get it checked out. I'm one of those people who always thinks the worst, whereas Alex is always very positive. So maybe we just balance each other out quite nicely. But so he went to the doctor, GP, and obviously, as they would, they triage it, and as a routine thing, sounds like a virus, COVID going around, come back in a couple of weeks if nothing changes. Lo and behold, nothing had changed over the course of a couple of weeks, and he was having, I'd say they were happening more frequently, maybe less intense, but more frequent. Went back, they were like, we'll refer you to an ear, nose and throat specialist, which I guess makes sense from a sinus perspective. Went to see the ENT guy, and he couldn't see anything, so he said that he would send Alex for a scan, an MRI, just as a precaution. So we thought nothing of it. He went and had his scan, and I think it might have been the same day. And I remember this moment really vividly. I was in our old apartment, kind of like it was a duplex, so I was working upstairs and Alex was downstairs, and I was on a call to my manager at the time. And Alex came running up the stairs, and I first thought, I was like, oh God, what have I done wrong? Because I think we'd had like a little argument that morning. And he was like, Anna, like I need you. And I was like, whoa. And I was like, okay, Jesse, was my manager at the time, I need to go. And put the ENT guy on loudspeaker, who then proceeded to say, there is a mass, or what looks to be a tumor, on the scan. Okay, like, what do we do now? And I guess in that, it's just shock, and you're not really taking it in. It's just kind of, okay, well, what's next? What do we do from here? They were amazing. Can't fault the process and how quick it was all dealt with. But he then referred the scan on to a neurosurgeon, and we ended up, both of us, having a call with the neurosurgeon that same evening, actually. Again, this was all virtual because of the COVID situation, and he put us at ease in the sense that he'd said, look, obviously from looking at the scan, it looks very clean, looks, in his humble medical opinion, that it probably is benign, but obviously the only way of really knowing that is to go in, get it out, and then do a biopsy to see what it is. So we were all surprisingly quite calm and measured about it. Just kind of, you go into, I guess, very rational mode. And he was booked in for brain surgery the following week, and so he went in for his surgery, and he all went. And I think that actually this was the hard part, because I couldn't go in obviously because of COVID. So I remember I took the day off work while he was having his surgery, just because I knew that I wouldn't be able to concentrate, and just the waiting game to hear how the surgery went. And I think it was, the surgeon, one of the surgeons eventually called me and said they were really pleased with how the surgery went, and Alex should hopefully be able to give me a call in a few hours once he's come round. And that day I didn't hear from Alex, and then obviously start to think the worst. Like, why hasn't he called? They said he would call, and that night was really difficult because I hadn't heard from him at all. I remember I just couldn't sleep. I think it was 3 a.m. and I called the hospital and asked to be put through to the ward, and spoke to obviously one of the nurses that was on the night shift, who probably was like, who is this woman calling in the kind of the early hours? But I just needed to know that I guess Alex was okay. Anyway, I was told he was okay. He was sleeping, and surprisingly it was 3 a.m. And then they called me the next day and patched Alex through, and apart from sounding groggy, he was his usual self, and he was kept in hospital for 5 days while they obviously through recovery, and then he was discharged and came home. I mean, Alex is absolute madman. I think he ended up taking a couple of weeks off work, despite having very entitled to be able to take about probably like 2 months off work. He's got such a strong work ethic, and also testament to him just kind of cracking on, and very strong-willed. But anyway, I guess maybe not. When I look back, I'm like, maybe we were a bit foolish, because we just thought, he's had the operation, the tumor's been taken out, it's probably benign, we'll just move on with our lives, without really thinking, what if it's something else? But then, as people say, I think there's no point worrying about something twice. So anyway, it was probably a couple of weeks before we had an appointment with the neurologist or the neurosurgeon, because I think the pathology took a little bit of time, or took longer than it would have ordinarily because of COVID, and obviously the labs are all backed up. Anyway, that was in person, so went in. I just knew that, something's going to be, I guess, bad news when they start with the good news. And the good news was that the surgery, he was really happy with how the surgery went, and he said that he was really aggressive with how much he took. So feels confident that they took what was visible on the MRI. But the bad news was that it was a glioblastoma, and Alex and I obviously were familiar with what glioblastoma is, and what on paper that meant, having done a little bit of research, and also me just I struggle sometimes a little bit with health anxiety, and so just knowing too much about too many things that I probably don't need to know about, and that's when I just was it was awful. I remember I uncontrollably silently weeping, I think for the rest of that day. And the neurosurgeon then said, oh well, I'll refer you onto the oncology team, you'll get a call, but obviously next step is going through chemotherapy and radiotherapy, but that can't happen straight away because you need to recover from the surgery. So we're kind of left with this news and not knowing what to do with it, and obviously from there you kind of get into action mode, and you can try and control what you can control. And I probably still got this. I remember we're going back, and I created this beautiful spreadsheet of questions that we wanted to ask, like different routes and scenarios, different like links to resources and information. And I guess that was maybe our way of trying to control what little control of the situation we had. And obviously over those, while you're waiting for him to recover and you're just waiting for the call and the appointments to be booked in, your mind starts to wander, you start to have more questions, etc. So when Alex finally went in to meet with his oncology team, I felt like we were very well informed, but also we knew the right question. We had all the questions that we wanted to ask.
And also, Anna,
that's when
you were the spokesperson, weren't you, I guess, for the family, for being in a country that no one else was there. You must have had questions from other people that you guys had to take forward, which also adds another added pressure.
I was Alex's PR person, and it's difficult because and I'm quite a communicative person anyway, and so I feel sometimes like it's a bit overwhelming when I don't like to not reply to people, and I'm always busy messaging my friends, but actually the challenge is, I guess, when you're explaining this situation, that if people will always have more questions, and I think looking back, maybe just making sure, like, kind of trying to protect your time as well, and your mental health, rather than you can't then take on everyone else's questions when you've got questions of your own. And actually during that time, because Alex and I didn't really we got back together in Australia, and actually through that time built a really strong relationship with his parents, I guess, as a result of something quite horrific, but that is when I guess the distance was really felt between home and Australia. And we hadn't made any, I guess, long-term decisions around whether we'd stay in Australia or whether we'd move back, but obviously on paper the diagnosis or the prognosis for glioblastoma isn't great, and that's when you Google, that's obviously the first thing that comes up. But obviously averages are there for a reason, and the reason there are averages is people hopefully live past those averages. So we just had to kind of approach it like that, and also I was then as well, I guess it's difficult, I think, as a partner, in terms of your life has changed, but also it's not changed at all. And something I really struggled with at the time, I feel quite guilty about this now, was when because this was obviously Alex's way of dealing with it, in terms of he started his chemotherapy, started his radiotherapy, and was so positive, and I really struggled with that positivity, because I guess he'd been faced with his own mortality in quite a confronting different way, and his approach was, I'm going to beat this, I'm going to go after this. So whereas I guess I'm the partner of someone who's going through that, but I just really struggled to get on board with that, that positive mindset. I couldn't do it. And I think that's because I guess I was kind of, still working, and then I was having to try and take on all this and process all of this at the same time, and found it a lot. And actually, looking back, kind of the first 3 weeks of Alex doing chemotherapy and radiotherapy, so Alex obviously couldn't drive because of what had happened. So I was the designated driver. I would take him. So before work, we'd always make sure that he'd had an early radiotherapy appointment. So try and 7:30, 8 a.m. we would drive over, and he would do his appointment, and I would drive back, and then I would start work, etc. And that was the process for six weeks. And I do, when I look back, and I don't know how I did that at the time, but you just have no choice. You just crack on, and maybe less time to think because you're just so focused on getting through, each day at a time. And also because Alex was responding very well, in terms of he bounced back from his surgery. He was doing loads of exercise. He was feeling good, and I was, I guess not feeling so good. And then it almost felt like it was, you kind of, is this happening? Like, maybe they made a mistake. Like, is he not, I think, because unless you've, gone through cancer yourself, or been impacted by someone close who has, I think maybe there's a perception of what, cancer or brain cancer looks like. And if you met Alex, and obviously Ellie, you know him well, you just, you wouldn't think it. And I think I struggled to, what's the word, like, I don't know, rationalize or kind of bring it all together that this was actually happening to him. And it was probably like a few weeks in with this kind of routine that we were in terms of him going through his treatment. And I think Alex has talked about it before, but he had a seizure down at the beach. I wasn't there. I just got a I think I was still asleep actually, because Alex had this habit of getting up at the crack of dawn like a madman to go for these swims. And I got a call from his friends saying that, you know, Alex has had a seizure on the beach. He's in hospital, but, you know, he's okay. Obviously, again, I couldn't go visit him. And yeah, then I guess the wheels came off a little bit, and we were like, oh crap, this, you know, is serious. And again, like, and my mind went to why has he had the seizure? The tumor must be back. And start to think the worst. And particularly over the preceding few weeks, where Alex was very much in and out of hospital, he was really struggling with rigors and his temperature, and it was just really awful to see. I remember, you know, something that sticks in my mind is when his hands were so shaky that he was having to drink with a straw. And actually, you know, with this guy who's so brave and strong, and just seeing someone you love in such a vulnerable light. And I think that was maybe the first time that, oh God, you know, this thing is real and it's hard. And yeah, to expect the unexpected. And you know, we're doing a lot of tests to understand what was maybe causing this situation, but they couldn't get to the bottom of it. And I think, you know, inconclusively, it was that actually, now your body has gone through this huge trauma having surgery. Mentally, you've gone through huge trauma. You're having all this chemotherapy, which, although is doing a lot of good, it also can do a lot, you know, can do bad as well. Having radiotherapy, and I think his body was just like, whoa, this is a lot. And obviously, I'm thankful that, you know, looking back, that was the reason rather than anything more sinister. Because I just, you know, became convinced that maybe, you know, it was back already. And then kind of muddle through the remaining few weeks of his treatment. And then for those, I guess, who have gone through it or kind of know the process, you then have another scan, and then you've got 4 or so weeks off before you then start your 20 I always call it a period cycle, because it's like 23 days on and then 22 days off, 5 days on the chemo. And that's when we made the decision to move back to the UK. I still look back and think, well, was that the right decision? I don't know, but we made the decision based on what information we had in front of us, which was, look, on paper, this is your diagnosis and this is the prognosis. And being very far away from home, particularly for Alex, but also for me, was difficult. So we quit our jobs. We went traveling around Australia for 6 weeks or so, and then moved back to the UK in January last year, which is a lovely time to move back to the UK from Australia and
in the summer
and the sunshine. Yeah, and so I think you're just in fight or flight mode, and I don't know, and I don't know if I have really kind of processed everything that has happened. And I guess something that maybe will be helpful for others is, so I mentioned, like, when I mentioned before, that I think, I am a little bit of an anxious person. I've always maybe been a little bit predisposed to anxiety and struggled a little bit with health anxiety before. But you think that when, I guess, your partner's diagnosed with something, like, obviously you're very much focused on their health, but actually, like, you also I started to look at my own health as well, and every little sensation in my body I would become so paranoid about, like so obsessive that there was something wrong with me. And something that I really got fixated on was my breathing, and I felt like I felt like I couldn't swallow properly, or I couldn't take a deep breath, and I got myself in such, and this kind of has been underlying, I guess, since we moved back from Australia. But I remember probably reached a head about this time last year where I was just every day having huge panic attacks, to the point, like, where it's taken me a long time to accept that they were panic attacks. I was so convinced that something awful was going to happen to me, and they became very, like, debilitating, and I was having them throughout the day for a period of 6 weeks or so. And I remember it was at all reached a head where I was at work one day and I just had the biggest panic attack of my life. I had just had to leave the office. I had to like literally go home because I was convinced that something awful was going to happen to me. And coincidentally, I had an appointment with the doctor that day because I'd been having a few conversations about how I was feeling and what was happening. And he said, you know, see how you go. Anyway, went to see him and I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like then and the reason I'm saying this is because he was like, well, Anna, like, you know, you've got a lot going on in your life. Like you've moved back from the UK, your partner's, you know, had or got brain, you know, living with brain cancer. All of this has happened in Australia. You've just been in fight or flight mode for so long. And I was like, yeah, I know, but like I'm not thinking about it. And he like consciously, and he's like, yeah, but that's subconsciously, it's got to go somewhere. Like, you know, it's manifesting itself in a very physical way through these panic attacks. And yeah, it's taken me, I just wonder if anyone else has like experienced anxiety or like don't feel guilty that you are, and like, you know, it's your body, you're kind of it's a really good book called, you know, your body keeps the score, and it's so true. And I think my body had clearly held on to all this trauma that Alex was going through, and also, you know, that indirect trauma that I was experiencing, and manifested itself in just this, yeah, it's horrible way. And long story short, I ended up, I'm on medication now to help with my panic attacks, which I'm so thankful for, because it just got to a point where I can't, you know, I can't handle all of this. And I just, whenever I think about, you know, the last year, and I think about what, you know, the doctor said to me around, actually, you know, remember that, yeah, it's got to go somewhere. And I think, so if you, when I'm kind of feeling, I guess, kind of mentally drained or feeling these feelings of panic, reminding myself that it's just my body, I guess, trying to protect my mind, and vice versa. And yeah, exactly. So I think that's been, I guess, a bit of a side effect, so to speak, of the condition. And as much as obviously, you know, you're looking at for Alex's health also, you then just becomes, I've you know, become very kind of paranoid and hyper aware of my own health as well, because you realize, I guess, you know, the fragility of life, and that things can change very quickly. But, you know, obviously with, you know, Alex at the moment, he's doing well, I guess, in terms of
amazingly well,
you know, yeah, like, and he finished his course of chemotherapy. He ended up doing the full 12 months, which I know not everyone can get to, because it, you know, takes its toll, but he really battled through and just cracked on. And I think they say that after those 12 months, there's not really any conclusive evidence that it's beneficial to carry on. But, you know, I'm glad that it's good that he was able to complete that course. I think the hard thing is now you feel like you're kind of fighting it and you're doing something, and now because he's not actively taking any medication, it's a kind of watch and wait situation, isn't it? And at the moment it scans every few months, and all we can hope for with, you know, waiting for a scan result at the moment, we just want them to be very boring and have nothing, you know, nothing to report. But it's that kind of it's like almost like a ticking time bomb, in terms of you're like waiting, that anticipation of like, will it come back, is it back? Like that's the hardest thing, to try and live alongside that. And but also we don't want to put our life on hold. We need to kind of moving on, you know, living our life as normally as we can. Like, you know, we got married, which was great. Still can't believe my wife. And we just bought a house. You know, obviously we'd love children in the future. I think, yeah, it's just how living alongside is, living alongside it is probably the best way to describe it. But it's always kind of there, and it's weird, like day to day I don't think about it much, but sometimes it would kind of hit you out of the blue, like, oh gosh, well, like what if it comes back? And also the practicalities of it coming back, even like over the last couple of weeks, you know, we're talking about, well, we bought this house, and then we're like, oh god, what if it comes back, and like the implications that has, you know, obviously mentally, but also financially as well. And but you're constantly in this, we just have to, I guess, hope for the best, and everything's been okay so far, to hope that it continues to be okay. That's probably, yeah, one of the hardest things now that we've moved into that next phase of, yeah, just the regular scanning, and trying to adjust back into normal life and being like a normal couple, which we are. Yeah,
and you're doing it so very well. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. So
you're amazing, both of you, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for being so honest, Anna, and you know, people will really benefit from listening to you. It's been really lovely to speak to you. Yeah.
You're welcome. Hopefully, yeah, it helps someone, and just knowing, yeah, you're not alone as well, I think is important. And also feel all the feelings is what my probably advice, and no feeling's a silly feeling or a bad feeling or something you shouldn't be feeling. I think Absolutely. Just process it as best you can.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna. I'm just gonna, yeah, thank
Thanks,
you again.
Ellie.
Thank you. Take care.